Hello, everyone. Welcome to The Natural View. I'm Maggie Jacqua. I'm the content director of Whole Foods Magazine, and we have a very special guest today. It is my honor to welcome Dr. Joel Evans. Dr. Evans is a board-certified OBGYN and international lecturer. He's the founder and director of the Center for Functional Medicine, and that's where he practices integrative gynecology and functional medicine. He's also the immediate past chief of medical affairs for the Institute of Functional Medicine, and breaking news here. He is the 2026 winner of the IFM Linus and Ava Helen Pauling Award. He is joining us today thanks to Konica Nutrients, and we're thrilled to have him. Welcome.
Great to be here.
Great to have you. So we're going to dive into a topic that really has been generating some buzz lately, and we want to help our audience understand it better. And that's surrounding mitochondria. So scientists have been learning more and more. There's a lot of research emerging about mitochondrial function. I've even heard it said that mitochondria are becoming like the next microbiome in terms of consumers having this awareness and product development, circling around this with innovation. Can you talk us through some of the buzz there and some of the emerging science that's making, this such a hot topic?
Listen, I have to give you some credit. You stole my thunder there about mitochondria becoming the new microbiome.
Well, you're probably where I heard it.
So just so I can differentiate, I'll say mitochondria are the new gut health. But really, though we're joking about it, it's very serious. It's very important because we are really in the midst of an incredible amount of new information about the importance of mitochondria. And so from a health perspective, when you realize that 70% of the population has one chronic disease, 40% have at least one chronic disease, and more than one, you're talking about a huge market segment of people that need to improve their health and either improve their chronic disease or reverse their chronic disease. So that's the imperative. And the reason mitochondria are so important in relationship to this chronic disease epidemic is because every chronic disease is associated with impaired mitochondrial function, and mitochondrial function contributes to every single chronic disease. So it's a bidirectional relationship. And so if we're trying to make people healthier, we have to improve mitochondrial function. But in addition to that, if we want to make people feel better, we have to improve mitochondrial function, because all of the nagging symptoms that can be annoying for people, like fatigue or muscle weakness or muscle aches and mood changes and cognitive issues and a sort of predisposition as opposed to a diagnosis of a chronic illness, like being pre-diabetic or elevated cholesterol before a diagnosis of heart disease. All of these are associated with mitochondrial dysfunction. So that's why mitochondrial function is so important. And then the final comment is about longevity, because longevity is a hot topic. It's a hot topic out there in the direct-to-consumer world, and it's a hot topic within the medical education world. And so at Institute for Functional Medicine, we are barraged with physicians wanting us to create curriculum about longevity and about mitochondria. And I just finished creating a course on on actually hormonal health, the advanced practice module in hormonal health. And that focuses a lot on mitochondria. And as I said, it's about diseases, but it's also about complaints. And when we're talking about women's health issues, and, I'm sure our audience is very much aware of the role that women have in making sort of health-related decisions for the entire family and not only themselves, but the issue affecting women as they're getting into midlife, those, sort of complaints of fatigue, weight around the middle. Like, who would think that weight around the middle is associated with mitochondrial issues? But it is, right? So all of these issues are mitochondria. So just to sum up, it's longevity, it's issues, and it's chronic disease.
So I want to dive kind of more into some of those as we go along the talk, but let's just back up. Can you talk about why, what leads to good mitochondrial health? What and how is aging involved in mitochondrial function? Like what is causing us to not have optimal mitochondrial function?
So mitochondria are what I would say are sophisticated machines. They are designed to produce energy in the form of this compound called ATP. So you remember maybe from high school that mitochondria are the energy powerhouse of the cell. And the reason they're the energy powerhouse of the cell is they produce that compound called ATP. And we need energy for every metabolic process in the body. And so we use a tremendous amount of ATP and it has to be constantly regenerated. And that's why there are mitochondria in every cell. And there are some places in the body where there's a tremendous amount of mitochondria. So in the brain, because cognition is so important, right? Brain function, when we had issues with oxygen, we preserved blood flow to the brain because the brain is so important, right? The heart, lots of mitochondria because it's got to beat. And in order to beat, it requires energy. Liver has a lot of mitochondria because in order to detoxify, to eliminate the toxins in our body, we need our liver. So there's a lot of mitochondria everywhere. And what happens is that with the aging process, a couple of things happen. Number one, inflammation increases, right? So you've probably heard that inflammation is one of the underlying imbalances that underlie almost every chronic disease. And inflammation increases as we age, and inflammation is made worse when we're stressed. Inflammation is made worse when we don't sleep. Inflammation is made worse when we don't eat properly. Inflammation is made worse when we gain weight. Fatty tissue, fat actually makes inflammatory chemicals. So inflammation increases, and inflammation is poison to the mitochondria, as well as free radicals. So you've heard about this concept of antioxidants, and antioxidants are good. Antioxidants prevent or reduce something called oxidative stress. Oxidative stress comes from these compounds that are called free radicals. Free radical production increases when we don't sleep, when we don't eat. The same things that produce inflammation produce free radicals. Now, the reason this relates specifically to mitochondria is because those free radicals are mitochondrial toxins, but also mitochondria produce free radicals. In the process of creating energy, it's a normal, appropriate waste product. And you have to have a compound around that can get rid of those free radicals. And that compound is ubiquinol. So ubiquinol is in the membrane of the mitochondria, and it exists as a free radical quencher or a free radical scavenger. And if you don't have enough ubiquinol, those free radicals leak, and they leak outside the mitochondria into the cell, and they leak out of the cell, and they can damage, blood vessel walls. They can do all sorts of damage throughout the body. So ubiquinol is so important because it is the number one mitochondrial protector. And that's why in the electron transport chain, you have ubiquinone, which is the precursor to ubiquinol. So we take ubiquinone and we turn it into ubiquinol, which is the form that the body needs. And back to your point about aging, as we age, we are less efficient and less effective at converting ubiquinone to ubiquinol. So when you talk about what aging does, it's inflammation, it's increased free radicals, and it's a decreased ability to convert ubiquinone to ubiquinol.
Okay, I want to get into that a little bit more because I think like widely people now have heard consumers are familiar with CoQ10, but they might not understand the distinction between CoQ10 and ubiquinol. And obviously, this is something that we want to be aware of because you've just gone through the myriad of reasons why we need to make sure that we're getting this. So, can you explain the distinction and a little bit more about why the form does matter for people who might just be about to grab anything off the shelf?
Well, the form matters because the form that's used to quench these antioxidants, which are supposed to be made, we just have to be able to get rid of them. So the body has a system for doing that, which is to convert ubiquinone to ubiquinol. So when you take as a supplement ubiquinone, that's great if the right amount is converted to ubiquinol.
Okay.
But as I said, as people age, it's not. So most of the, sort of ubiquinone versus ubiquinol sort of controversy is because people don't understand how much the body needs ubiquinol. They also don't understand that most of the CoQ10 in the body is ubiquinol. And so when you measure circulating levels of ubiquinone to ubiquinol, there's much more ubiquinol than there is ubiquinone. And that's because that's what you need.
Excellent. All right. I want to get into kind of some of those benefits a little more, but I want to touch on something a little bit more deeply. I was at a women's health conference yesterday, and ovarian health and egg quality was a top note in a way that I've been to plenty of these conferences and I've not seen this discussed so much. So, can you talk about mitochondria? I want to look a little bit more about women's health and women's aging. So, mitochondrial health, reproductive health, egg quality, how that's all connected, and bringing it into how ubiquinol can be beneficial.
So I'm so happy that this is now talked about in conferences. I thought the only place this was talked about was in our little narrow slice of the world, which was the functional medicine education. So almost every aspect of women's health is impacted by mitochondria. So the first thing to understand is that ubiquinol is so important to mitochondrial health for those reasons that we just discussed, right? The mitochondria produce those free radicals. Those free radicals are toxic to mitochondria, and so they have to be captured. And the way that we do that is through ubiquinol, not ubiquinone, ubiquinol. So if we want to look at women's health issues, we say, well, how is it that mitochondria matter for women's health? And you mentioned, eggs and egg quality. Well, eggs have, follicles have a tremendous amount of mitochondria, almost 10 times the amount of mitochondria to the sperm. And the sperm are the ones that are doing all the work swimming, right? So, it's not typically 10-1, but it's a big, difference in terms of increase in the egg. And that's because eggs are, responsible for, dividing. And when the sperm hits the egg and forms that combined zygote, it's the mitochondria that are in the egg that are responsible for the cell division. And so keeping chromosomes healthy so that they divide properly is something that mitochondria do. And so that's why maintaining egg function and quality is so important, and as a direct result of CoQ10. And we see in, fertility clinics how people, egg quality is increased when people are giving ubiquinol or given ubiquinol. Then we move into midlife for women. And what happens in midlife is that on an age-related basis, they start to develop things like heart disease, cognitive decline, maybe some hot flashes, all of the chronic illnesses start to, become present, prediabetes, diabetes. And I talked before about this connection with chronic disease of mitochondria, but specifically now it's estrogen related because most people don't realize that estrogen receptors are on mitochondria. So why does a mitochondria have an estrogen receptor? We don't know the why specifically, but we do know the effect, which is estrogen makes mitochondria function better. And the lack of estrogen that happens with perimenopause and menopause diminishes mitochondrial function. We know that the mitochondria that are in the brain have estrogen receptors. So when we look at the symptoms of menopause and perimenopause, they really mesh perfectly with mitochondria. And the fact that estrogen improves mitochondrial function and the fact that estrogen deficiency impairs mitochondrial function means you can't separate the two. And that's why this midlife tendency to chronic disease can be prevented. So, for example, we know insulin and blood sugar dynamics get worse as women age and as women lose the amount of circulating estrogen in their body. Well, guess what? That lack of estrogen impairs glucose balance. So, mitochondria are important for glucose balance. Estrogen is important for glucose balance. So, estrogen is important for both. And that's what really, when we say the word has to get out, that's the word that has to get out, that everything is interrelated.
Well, I feel like as soon as we get off this call, I need to go get a bottle of ubiquinol, start taking it right away. So if I'm, doing that, I know, it's like I said at the top, thanks to Konica for getting us together for this call. They have a ubiquinol product. It's been the subject of numerous studies. Can you talk about some of the compelling findings from the research that practitioners, our retailers, and if any consumers find us or retailers are communicating to consumers what they should know about in terms of the research and what they're choosing off the shelf?
So there's a lot of studies on ubiquinol. It's all compelling. It really does help mitochondria. And I think if I were to just, list some things, there's a reason we coined the term, or not we, but the researchers pre, the business world, just researchers coined the term ubiquinol because it's a play on the term ubiquitous. Ubiquitous meaning it's everywhere. So this is a compound that's everywhere. That's how it got its name. And as I said, there's more ubiquinol to ubiquinone. So it's everywhere in the body and is an integral part in creating cellular energy. And when the cells don't have enough energy, they misfire and you don't feel good and you get chronic disease. And then I alluded to the fact that as we get older, you make less ubiquinol. Well, I'm glad I have a chance to qualify that because it's not like, oh, when you hit 80, you make less ubiquinol. That production starts to slow down as early as when we're in our 20s. So,
Okay.
yeah. So, I would say most people come into the longevity world, in midlife or in their 40s. By then, you're already making less ubiquinol.
Wow. Okay. So it's not just for me, it's for my daughter who is 21 too.
Absolutely.
And for formulators, can you tell us about any attributes that make Kaneka's ubiquinol ingredient so appealing?
What I would say is for formulas, people like ubiquinone because it can be a powder, right? Ubiquinol always had to be like an oily liquid. But now that, recently those formatting options have changed. So you can add Canica ubiquinol to gummies. You can add it to liposomal formulations, soft chews, and even a stick pack. So it's not just a soft gel that you need. So there are other ways to format this so that companies can embrace it.
Excellent. Okay. Looking ahead, anything you see down the pipeline in terms of research that you think is going to have a big impact on dietary supplements in the years ahead, maybe 5 years down the road? Anything emerging, bubbling to the surface that you can clue us in on?
Yeah. So, there are, when I talk to the leading researchers, and I'm very blessed that I'm able to have access to some of these leading researchers, um, the research on longevity, the research on aging, the parameters are not going to be just about, drugs and chronic disease. We're going to be starting to study ubiquinol levels with different chronic diseases, and then how giving ubiquinol, can be helpful. So mitochondrial health is now a focus of research. And so we're going to be seeing the results of that. And I'm very, very excited about that.
Yeah, so personalized medicine, we might really start to see this
Absolutely.
way more. Excellent. All right. Any final takeaways you want to leave us with? Anything we didn't touch on that you feel like we should get out there?
No, I think we've touched on it. I think the important thing to remember is mitochondrial health. And, I don't want to say is more important than gut health. What I'd say is mitochondrial health and gut health are really the most important things out there, when we're looking about keeping people healthy, and, with longevity. And that's the message, that if you're, if you've been taught, start with the gut, you need to rewire the way you think and say, start with the gut and the mitochondria.
Excellent. All right. Well, thank you, Dr. Evans, and our thanks to Konica. I know they'll keep us posted as more research findings come out in this space. They'll let us know and we'll share the news. So great having you as a guest. Thank you. And we'll go from there. We'll see what's ahead.
Thank you.